Hey guys, Rominating Reaper here. A bit of an impromptu cinema short video, but I'm outside Odeon, as you can see. I'm about to take advantage of, yep, the new Odeon Extras scheme. Found out on Monday that my account had been upgraded to this new scheme, so I could get points on the films and snacks, which is great. So I'm going to take advantage of that and catch a showing of Last Breath. This is the one about the divers rescuing a crew member at the bottom of the sea. Looks good. I've heard quite good things about it. Seems like quite a good, claustrophobic thriller. Ripe old big screen experience. So, without further ado, I'm going to head in, get my ticket, get some snacks, and some reward points for Last Breath. So, yes, I've got my popcorn here and a summer fruits oasis, ready to watch a high stakes diving mission. So, yeah, Last Breath. I am back from seeing it. This is directed by Alex Parkinson, who previously directed the documentary that this is based on. So he's someone who, going in, already has a bit of knowledge and attachment regarding the story. So obviously, yes, the room is there for gripping, emotionally involved storytelling, especially when paired with what little I knew of the story going in, just sounding ripe for an exciting cinematic dramatization. But does it actually live up to the anxiety inducing potential of its claustrophobic setting? Let's find out. So the film follows a crew of saturation divers in Aberdeen carrying out the incredibly dangerous job of working with pipelines at the bottom of the ocean. One day, the crew heads out for a fairly routine job where they are setting out replacing a bit of pipeline when suddenly they hit a very heavy storm. And in the midst of this, one of the divers, Chris, gets trapped in the manifold. With his oxygen supply dwindling, his teammates, Duncan and Dave, and the crew of the ship scramble to rescue him and bring him back alive. So, my expectations going into this were for a claustrophobic, contained stress builder, and to a certain extent, I got that. It's a pretty solid offering overall, but definitely could have pushed it that little bit further. Now, to its credit, it runs at a very lean 93 minutes, which is perfect for this kind of story. It's a very straightforwardly focused tale. It's that sort of Michael Mann thing of, men on the job striving to carry it out at the highest level, which makes it very straightforwardly engaging to watch, especially as the film shows us, how these men act, and think when they're on the job having to think fast, which very much does keep us engaged, and there's those little bits of banter in there that allow us to buy into established history, and the result of that is that the emotional beats that come from that actually do kind of land, and it's paired up with some very strong filmmaking craft as well to build this very tense story. It's a very strong sense of atmosphere to it. It's got strong sound design and a score by Paul Leonard Morgan, the guy that did the score for Dread. But I think this film's strongest asset is the cinematography. It is very, very well done and really does a fantastic job of building that, that very tight and tense atmosphere. You've got plenty of, real claustrophobic close-up shots, It very much puts the viewer right into the middle of this tense scenario. But the way it uses color is just, it is gorgeous. I really loved how they contrasted the dark, murky depths of the ocean with the bright, glowing lights of the crew's equipment. I especially loved the flare shots. Oh my god, those were beautiful. Just the sheer level of aura radiating was just fantastic. You know, with all that in mind, it's not quite sort of edge of your seat, stress inducing as you'd expect it to be, but it is pretty gripping overall. Unfortunately, though, what lets it down is the character writing. Obviously, as we learned, the real rescue only took place over a period of about half an hour. So obviously, to get a 90-minute feature out of that, you definitely gotta fill the space somewhere. And obviously, we spend a bit of time in the first act getting to know the crew, which is allows us to get invested in them when shit does go down. But the way they go about it, for a film that is surprisingly quite British, yeah, there are a lot of like Hollywood cliches in there. You've got the one who has a girlfriend at home, which is a not so subtle hint to the audience that this is the guy that things will go badly for. And you've got the one who is about to retire but isn't ready for it yet. And you've got the one who, is very emotionally distant and driven and focused on the job, but deep down has a good heart, which reveals itself in later on in the film. All that stuff is there, present and correct, and it means that the characters aren't as fully fleshed out and well rounded as they should be to properly get emotionally invested in them. Because let's be real, it is that atmosphere and the sort of focused storytelling that is really doing the heavy lifting here to allow those emotional beats and those little bits of banter to land. But despite this though, I think the actors do a pretty solid job elevating some fairly thin characters. We have Woody Harrelson as the veteran one of the bunch, Duncan. He's a guy who very much deeply cares about his crewmates, and obviously that comes through on the job. He plays it very, very well. You can always expect a reliable, solid performance from Woody Harrelson, and that's what you get here. We also have Simu Liu as Dave, who is like the sort of more stoic and reserved one of the bunch, and there's that sort of danger with this type of performance that it could potentially veer on the wrong side of the scale into wooden territory. But thankfully, though, Simu pulls it off very well. He does a very good job with it, and keeps the balance just right. Between reserved and the more emotional stuff later on in the film. He does a good job. We also have Finn Cole as Chris, who is obviously the one that things go badly for. He does a very good job as a guy who is put into this impossible, potentially life-threatening scenario, but because of like willpower and the motivation of his loved ones, he pulls through. He does a very good job with it, and he does have good chemistry with Woody Harrelson that allows us to buy into their relationship. And rounding things out, we also have Cliff Curtis as the ship's captain, who's working round the clock, against immense pressure to rescue Chris and bring him home. They all do a very, very solid job, and obviously with some well done set pieces, we are invested in the stakes as all these rescue attempts are carried out with heavy implications should it go wrong, right up to the final act, which is where unfortunately the film loses a bit of momentum. Because again, the characters are fairly thin and, driven by standard Hollywood cliches. It means that, this is the part of the film that is decidedly less interesting than the two-thirds leading up to it. But again, because of, the fairly tight storytelling, there are those emotional moments that do land, and there obviously is the text ending, where they reveal that they still haven't figured out how Chris survived as long as he did, which puts everything that we have watched into perspective. Just very very fascinating stuff, and of course it ends on that true story thing of where they show like real footage of the real people, and and they look nothing like. And this is not a knock against the film or anything, but Jesus, they look nothing alike. I get they weren't going for resemblance or anything, but like, this isn't a knock against the film. I just find it funny. Overall, Last Breath is a pretty solid little tension builder that has, fairly good, engaging storytelling, a tense atmosphere, and solid acting. It could have stood out that little bit more, though, with stronger character writing. Out of 10, Last Breath gets a 7. So yeah, let me know down in the comments. Have you seen Last Breath? What did you think of it? Have you seen the documentary this is based on? If so, how did that fare in telling this story in comparison? Let me know all that down in the comments. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're new. And don't forget to turn on post notifications so you don't miss an upload.